drama, the sadness,
and I remember turning the corner and seeing the pile, and it just was so massive.
You knew that they had to be full of people, and here we just wanted to get into a car and go there and do what we could.
People came together and said, how can we help? How can we help these people?
Terrorists can do, and how vulnerable we are to terrorism.
It just started off as a normal work day, and my office is 2 doors over, and the mayor's secretary is in between us, and I do not recall how we first found out that something was going on. My guess would be that someone called us and told us that this was happening, and then so we went downstairs. We knew that there was a TV sitting downstairs in the basement that wasn't being used, so we went down and got that, brought it up here, and managed to get a signal and hooked it up.
There was a replay of the plane flying into the first building, and then as we were talking, the second plane went flying into the building. So then I knew that it wasn't just somebody off their flight path, and we knew that at that point something was up. And of course the commentators were all talking about the possibility of a terrorist attack.
Well, I was back home, back at the office probably by 10:30 or 11 o'clock that morning, so it was still very raw news. I'm not sure that both towers had fallen by then, and I mean people were leaping out of the buildings. I mean the drama, the sadness, the reality of the death was so apparent, and I, like everybody else, ended up glued to a television set.
We were starting to try and localize the story. That's what we do here at a local newspaper, is we look for the local angles. Who might be flying that day, who might be in New York, who might be at the Pentagon, those types of things that we have local connections with or for. So we started probing those things. In the meantime, in the background, of course, we have the news on and the TV going, and are watching it unfold before our very eyes, just like everyone else was.
I don't know what prompted me to do this. I didn't really think about it too much, but when I came in the newsroom, after I got my bearings straight as to what was going on, I immediately walked over to Susan Shea, who is the woman who was, along with Mike Patterson, were editors, and she is the one who hired me, took a chance on me, who didn't have any journalism experience, and hired me as a writer and a photographer, and let me go into photography more full time. I walked straight over to her and I said, let me go to New York.
That there were probably a number of people here that just wanted to get into a car and go there and do what we could to help. But we also realized at the same time that that's not the way things are done, and we couldn't just do that. Both people in the police department and people in the community were calling me, for reassurance, for information. They thought that I might have a hotline basically for the information that's coming out of Washington, and literally all you could do was try to calm the situation.
We canceled classes for the afternoon and had forums then in the evening, and then subsequent to that throughout the week, just to get people feeling comfortable about exchanging their views and maybe what might be coming up. So we used it as an educational event to have open discussion, but we did, I think, wisely cancel the class in the afternoon because nobody was concentrating on anything other than that.
I think every newsroom knew that it was obviously just a huge, sad story, but I don't think at the time people understood how sad it was going to be, because initially before the towers fell, you had people filing out, and there was somewhat of an orderly process. You saw the fire crews, rescue vehicles going in and getting people out, and you thought, okay, they're going to get people out of here. There's obviously some damage on some floors where there's certainly going to be deaths. But then as that started to unfold, you saw people trapped on certain floors of the building and choosing to jump. You then saw the collapse of the buildings, and when that mushroom cloud of dust came up and people were just scrambling, you knew that was going to be a lot more significant than you originally thought, and there would be a lot more deaths involved.
I think it was on Greenwich and Beale or somewhere down there. It was pretty close. And I remember turning the corner and seeing the pile, and it just was so massive. I couldn't get my brain around how much metal there was there, and that wasn't even one of the towers. That was one of the other World Trade Center buildings. And then turning around and looking at the people and just seeing the shock on their faces as they would come into this open street area and look down the avenue like I was for the first time, and seeing the shock on the faces, and these were local people, New Yorkers, that sort of thing. I think that impact of seeing that the rubble for the first time, and then getting up on the building and seeing even more destruction.
When those buildings collapsed, you knew that they had to be full of people, and I mean, you couldn't tell any of that, you know, from watching, but I mean, you knew that there were firefighters in there. You knew there were police officers in there. And
being a firefighter, of course, one of our first thoughts was with the firefighters that we knew were in there doing their jobs, and that actually says a lot for the profession. That, you know, even under difficult circumstances, they went in and did their jobs, and unfortunately they died doing it, but it's just the way that happens.
I think the worst part was the fear that I had and that everybody had, and people didn't react, you know, in a way that they had reacted before. I think there were, for example, I had two of my sons were not in Alliance at that time, so I started to fear for them a little bit, because again, we didn't know what the game plan was in terms of a terrorist attack on our turf, and I think that's how everybody was. There was just this uneasiness. I remember traveling a couple days later, going over bridges, as we commonly do when we go from one place to another, thinking, is this bridge rigged to be blown up or something? You know, it really raised the awareness of what terrorists can do and how vulnerable we are to terrorism. And so this uneasiness is what was most difficult for me, I think.
It seemed like all bets were off. Anything could happen. I mean, it just seemed like, well, if the Pentagon's going to get hit, they're hitting the World Trade Center, you know, how vast is this? How, like everybody, how deep does it go? How many planes are there? But the Pentagon, I mean, you know, you'd think, as obvious a target as that is, you would think it would be an impenetrable airspace. But with National City right next to it, which I've flown into many times, that compact airspace, there's planes flying around the Pentagon all the time for commercial reasons. But the Pentagon was just shocking. I mean, that's just a building you don't think ever has a chance to have anybody get close to.
you know, that, to me, that, you know, might have been the kind of reaction that I would have, like, you know, that, you know, let's at least try to do something. But I thought, you know, and it was good that there were enough people on that plane that felt that way, that they could actually mount some kind of resistance. But I mean, you know, the heroics are just incredible on something like that.
Unbelievable courage and unbelievable, you know, self-preservation taking over. I mean, obviously, you know, these people were trying to stay alive. You know, whether they clearly there's an assumption, I think, you know, fairly proven, that they had an idea that they were part of a bigger plot. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure an element of, let's not let this plane go into anything else, but let's get out of this alive too. And I think everybody's reaction is just, you know, like mine would be the terror of having that situation presented to you and other strangers, and deciding how to handle that. I've been out there. I went out there about a year afterwards, and I've been to the site, and to see this lonely open field with, I took lots of pictures of the memorial in its infancy out there, and you know, to see this lonely field where you just know that nothing survived out of this crash is just horrific to think about. And you know, you think about that when you fly, you think about all this stuff when you fly. And
it brought a sense of pride. I mean, the fact that people were willing to step up and do that after knowing what happened, and you know, they also gave their lives for the. I put them right up with military personnel, firefighters, policemen, and they were willing to step up and put their lives ahead of others. And by their actions, they saved the lives of who knows how many. So I thought I was very proud of that fact.
A lot of pride started to show. America was appearing to stand up for itself. vehicles had flags on antennas. I mean, it was very, very common to see flags. I imagine the flag business did an extraordinary business at that time because everybody was flying the American flag, and it was wonderful.
Well, I think obviously, you know, you have that, or many have that image of George Bush going to the scene and getting the bullhorn, and there was a real rallying point for everybody, whether you were left or right, Democrat or Republican, or what, all that was put aside for a short time. And people came together and said, how can we help? How can we help these people that were impacted most directly? And how can we secure our nation and our grander community so that these things won't happen?
I thought it was overwhelming. I mean, just here in Alliance itself, we actually had a fundraiser where we were standing on the streets collecting money, and in a short period of time we collected over $70,000 for the victims of this tragedy in New York and Washington and Pennsylvania.
And it was really a warm time in terms of, you know, the students and the administration and the faculty trying to do the right thing, trying to make sense of all this.
I thought, I mean, that was heartwarming. I mean, just, and not just within the United States. I mean, the things that you saw going on in other countries was, because it just seems like, you know, you just have this feeling like the United States in other countries, you know, were disliked, in some ways hated. Obviously people are envious of the United States in a lot of ways, but to see the sincere outpouring, I think, from other countries was very impressive, and but it was nice to see the country coming together, you know, that type of thing, because so many times we're bickering about such, you know, dumb little things, and then something like that just kind of welds everyone together, and that's a good feeling.
I'm sure the good things always come out of tragedies. I mean, one thing I'm sure is there's those that forgive, and that's always a great thing that comes out of tragedy for those that are big enough to do that. On the other hand, I think it's certainly appropriate for people to have concerns about terrorism and their safety, and wanting safeguards and additional security to protect their families and loved ones.
I don't think we can take anything for granted anymore. I think terrorism's here to stay. There's always going to be those, you know, extremists out there that really want the United States to falter. But I think we're now a little bit more aware of it. And in some ways, that makes us a little safer, less prone to a surprise attack. Doesn't mean we still can't get attacked, but we should be on our toes now.
People need to be more aware of their surroundings and what's going on, and pay more attention to what's going on. A lot of times, and, you know, we try to put all of it on the federal government to protect us, but sometimes we got to protect ourselves and be more diligent about things that we do, and use common sense. And, you know, I'll say it because I'm the fire chief, practice more fire safety. That's we need to do those things.
I can tell you, I'm so proud of where we are today. I won't say it's because of 911, but it's probably a byproduct of 911, the tragedy that happened, that we have become better equipped, better prepared, better trained, and more ready to respond to something like this than we were when I was a young police officer. And that makes me feel confident in what's going on. It allows me to operate every day without fear of what's going to happen next, because, you know, we have resources, law enforcement resources, that are in existence and can be here relatively quickly to respond to these needs. So on the 10th anniversary of September 11th, you can't say anything good about what happened, but you can say that we have grown, we've come a long way since then, and, you know, Lord willing, it won't happen again.